What we want to do in this meeting this afternoon is follow up with some of the committee's requests for additional information from a variety of the departments. Again, we want to try to keep our presentations focused on the 07 budget, and I would ask the committee to do the same, to stay focused on 07. We have that before us before we'll get into the 08 budget. I do not have my agenda in order with me.
In alphabetical order by agency, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we could do that, or we could go with the GBI first.
Which is a key ingredient, the key ingredient in the manufacture of methamphetamine. That combined with aggressive law enforcement has led to the lessening of the number of meth labs that are operating in Georgia. Now, what has happened is the meth problem has shifted from the methamphetamine being available from the meth labs, these being the small lab that use pseudoephedrine and phosphorus and iodine and things like that to make the methamphetamine. Because of the efforts I talked about, the methamphetamine is not being used now. It's not coming from the labs. Instead, it is being imported into the state. We've seen a shift from the availability of methamphetamine is no longer manufactured here, but is being brought into the state and is being brought in by Mexican gangs. And this is a total shift in the availability of meth. Now, the fact of the matter is, based on our information from the Drug Enforcement Administration, our own experience in working cases on the street, you can buy the Mexican methamphetamine in Georgia for substantially the same price, and in some cases less than what a person can manufacture it with. So there's not an incentive there for a meth user or a meth dealer to make the methamphetamine in the small labs, because it's difficult to get the chemicals, plus there's an immense amount of danger in manufacturing methamphetamine. So instead they take the easy way out and use the methamphetamine imported into Georgia. And we have the shift into why do we have an increase in the importation of methamphetamine. Number one, there's a demand for it, but number two is there is a large, as we all know, there's a large Hispanic community in Georgia now, and it is easy for the Mexican gangs to assimilate into the communities. They don't stand out, and they're able to operate. Plus, they're bringing in tremendous amounts of methamphetamine because the Atlanta area is a transportation hub, and we're just one spot where the meth is dropped off, and then it goes on throughout the southeastern United States. Figure 3 outlines the, and I thought the committee would find this of interest. This is the number of meth cases that have been submitted to the GBI crime lab, and it breaks it down by county of submission. And you'll notice that the red counties have entered 200 plus cases of methamphetamine into the GBI crime lab. Now, we believe that lab submissions of drug evidence is a strong indicator of a problem. And this is another factor you couple with the arrest by county. But in this case, we've tracked the submissions from the lab for FY 06, and then we have done FY 07 through December of 2006 on the. So this gives you a pretty clear idea of where the meth problem is associated. It is our view that failure to aggressively confront the methamphetamine problem is going to result in the use of the drug going into the other areas that are now virtually untouched by methamphetamine or do not have a problem. That will continue to increase. For comparisons, we have provided a chart which outlines the number of cocaine cases submitted to the GBI crime lab in FY 2006, and lists their counties outlines the counties and their number of submissions, the general number of submissions, just so you can have a comparison of the extent of the cocaine problem and methamphetamine. The cocaine problem, the use of cocaine, sale of cocaine, and related crimes is still the major problem as far as extent-wise in Georgia, but methamphetamine is closely climbing in on that. Now, also have a bar chart which lists the methamphetamine submissions to the state crime laboratory starting in 2000 and going through 2006. And as you see, in 2006 we have actually have a decrease of meth drug submissions to the state crime laboratory. Is my belief that relates to the decrease in the number of meth labs that were operating in the state, because as you saw, we had a decrease in that, and that's related to the number of cases submitted. The use of the last chart compares submissions to the state crime laboratory based on comparing cocaine and methamphetamine. And you see, and this very plainly points out that cocaine is still the major drug submitted to the laboratory, but methamphetamine is working its way up there. Our intentions, the governor's budget for amended FY 07 call for the GBI to receive, if funded by the legislature, the startup cost for the 15-person meth force, $413,000. That is a startup cost, which would allow us to procure the equipment and be prepared to go forward with a 15-agent class if it is funded by the legislature in the FY08 budget. And what our intent is with these 15 agents is to have them assigned to areas and into programs that will be devoted to combating the Mexican meth gangs and their importation of methamphetamine into the state. Last year the General Assembly funded, on the governor's recommendation, 15 agents. Those agents were hired. They have been trained, and they're now on the street working the methamphetamine cases. This would essentially double the size of those agents assigned exclusively to that problem. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to answer any questions or provide clarifications.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions? All right, I'm working off numbers here. 23. Chairman Day.
Good afternoon, Mr. Keenan.
Mr. Chairman.
The numbers that we have here are not including the salaries at which these new agents will be hired. Based on our conversations in the past, the GBI has a problem not attracting people but retaining people.
That is correct.
Are they being paid market value, so to speak, or is their pay consistent with what field agents and the scientists you might have been paid in the past?
The disparity in the pay comes in when, and I'm using the figures from the state merit system survey, which looked at the comparable ranks of special agents in surrounding states and compared some of local agencies. And based on the merit system figures, we're 12 to 14%. We pay 12 to 14% less than comparable positions in surrounding states. So that creates the problem with retention of agents. As I've previously said, we're in our hiring process where we just hired. We're in the process of hiring 12 agents now to fill previous vacancies. We had over 400 people that went through an interview process. They take a merit system exam. We take the top people in their grade on the merit system exam, and we interview them. We interviewed over 400 people for 12 positions. So we have no problem recruiting. What will happen is that after the agents have been on 5 to 7 years, and we've invested all this training into them, they become very much a sought-after commodity, and we lose these agents it used to be to the federal agencies, but now we lose them to local agencies also, because of and we do exit interviews. We know why agents are leaving, and it is based on pay. And we're running through that. We're having the same difficulty with scientists. But to give an example, and our turnover rate in agents who resigned to go to other jobs from 2001 to 2006 is 99 agents, and our training cost for those 99 agents was $4.7 million. At the same time, we lost 60 scientists, and the training cost for those 60 scientists is $5.4 million. So we've become the recruitment and the training ground for other law enforcement agencies. I don't believe that we hire anyone who comes on the GBI with the intent of this being a stepping stone. Our process is too thorough to permit that. But what happens is the work of an agent and a scientist is very difficult. And when they believe that and the figures show that they are not paid comparable salaries, coupled with the hard work, then they look for other opportunities.
You pretty much answered my second question on the cost of training, but is there a way we can get a copy of that?
Sir?
Your cost of training and the number you've lost, say, in the last 4 years?
We'll be glad to provide that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, I may have missed this. If you covered it, I apologize,
Yes,
but this is not really a budget question, although I guess we need something we need to think about. I noticed on the data that there is a downward tick on meth-related arrest and on meth labs over the last year or two.
Correct.
Have y'all assigned any reason or reasons for that?
I know that the number of meth labs, the decrease in the number of meth labs seized by law enforcement is directly related to the strong legislation passed by this General Assembly regulating pseudoephedrine. And that coupled with aggressive law enforcement, because we've done a tremendous amount of training of local law enforcement on how to detect meth labs and how to seize them. But quite frankly, those labs have gone down. And with them, the arrest for meth labs. But at the same time, the shift in the methamphetamine we're seizing now and the arrests we're making, that methamphetamine originated with the Mexican gangs importing it into the state. I believe that the arrest figures will probably climb, but if they don't, they're still substantial.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Director, following up with what Chairman Dave was talking about as far as this training, you're telling us that the ones that are leaving, or you're looking at about 5 to 7 years of longevity, and then there's a turnover occurring at that point in time.
Yes, sir.
And those that are leaving, you're saying, is due to a lack of salary increases.
Yes, sir.
Well, what have you done as far as any studies to try and see, is there anything we should look at in that time frame of an agent's longevity with the state to change their pay grades or something to improve it that way?
Yes, sir. My belief is that the answer is to increase the salary for agents that are in that 5 to 7 years. Because here's what happens. At 5 to 7 years, an agent and scientists start making a decision of whether they're going to stay in state employment or whether they're going to leave and go to another agency and pick up their retirement. That's when they start deciding. We put together a white paper for the governor, which is, in its simplest forms, calls for an agent after they have been on the state for 10 years, scientist and agent, been on the state for 10 years and have reached a certain level of performance and education and training, that they would make $62,000 a year. That is what we view would would make us competitive with other with surrounding states and even with federal agencies.
Would you be able to share with us at least a synopsis of your white paper?
Yes, sir. We can provide the white paper to everyone.
Mr. Chairman, want to look at come the regular. Considered as a primary concern, I feel, of the committee, to see how we stop that crime.
Yes, sir. Just to follow up on that, and then we got Chairman Knox, but we've asked the departments to provide this committee all the submissions that were made to the governor, the ones that were recommended to bring forward, the ones that were not. We just want this committee to have the opportunity to look at the same information that was looked at by the executive branch.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at let me ask you this. What is the average rate of increase, or do you know what the rate of increase was or has been that folks are making this change for? Are we talking about a 20% increase in salary, or a 2% or a no percent? They're just going for the retirement?
They're leaving us to go to the higher paying jobs. Federal agencies pay in the 20% more than the state does.
I thought I understood you say, though, they were more likely to go to local agencies now.
Well, we have seen a shift in the last 3 years of them going to agencies. Still, the greatest, I can give a breakdown here of where the agencies, where they're going to. The vast majority go to federal agencies. After that, they go to local agencies and private sector. Federal agencies will always pay more than the state, and we're not asking to be comparable with them because many times they're paid obscenely high salaries in my mind. But the $62,000 would make us competitive. Here's what happens with an agent and a scientist at 5 to 7 years. They look at what their counterpart, they look what a fellow scientist who's been on the state 15 years make, and they may only make $5,000 to $6,000 to $7,000 a year more. In some cases, not even that. They can project out. They can look at what an agent been on 5 years can look at what an agent is making at 15 years and pretty well tell where they may be at. And it is not. They start making those decisions. It's not in their interest to stay.
One further, how did we arrive at the number of agents that we need to carry on the meth war, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better term?
Look, it was a combination of work with the governor of laying out what our agents are doing now, how many agents we believe would make an impact, and what the cost was for that. We could put, if the funding was there was a blank check, we could go for 50 agents and keep them all busy. But this is a reasonable force. One of the things we're going to see in the shift as we're working the Mexican methamphetamine gangs, that is more intense work than responding to a meth lab. The working the gangs requires wiretaps, it requires extensive surveillance, it requires a tremendous amount of money for the operational money, that which we have not had to deal with on the meth lab.
I guess it'd be easier if we could keep them out in the first place, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir. That is why you will find law enforcement, and I know that Commissioner Donald will speak to this, and local law enforcement will. Enforcement is not going to be the answer to the meth problem. We will not solve it with no matter how aggressive we get in the enforcement. It is going to require prevention program. It is going to require education program. It is going to require treatment, because we got all of that. It's all a package deal. I wish it was as simple as saying, give me X amount of agents and I can assure you we can eliminate the problem. That's not the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I can go ahead. I was just trying to get something clear in my mind, Director. When you have an authorized of 200 and, well, it's not, the 244 is authorized or filled? Oh, 280 is the authorized, correct?
That is correct.
Number of agents, 244 filled, and you got 36 vacancies. Are you funded for the full 280?
No, we're not. We're not funded. Part of these vacancies that we're talking about will be filled if the General Assembly appropriates the money for the governor's initiatives.
Well, let me look at it historically. If you've got a figure of what you have as agents authorized for your department, and you have a request for appropriations, are you asking for your appropriations request for the full complement of what you're authorized or what you actually have the ability to hire?
That we are not, and that is based on...
You're not what?
We're not asking for the full complement for all vacancies to be filled, and this is based on the budget process we've worked under for the last few years, where we this year, for instance, we can ask, it is a flat budget, and we can present white papers for enhancements, but as far as saying to fill all the vacancies, that has not been asked for.
Well, how many were you funded during the current 07 fiscal year of agents?
For 07, we're funded for what we have filled now. What is our company?
I see 244 filled agents.
That is.
We can fill 14 more, and that's all for fiscal year 07.
So you're actually funded then for 258.
That's correct. And we're filling the 12. The agents we're hiring now are to fill existing vacancies.
One last question: what
yes,
happens to those excess funds that you don't have for agents to pay?
Excess funds that we don't.
What happens to the funds that are not used, appropriated but not used for the payment of agents? Let's put it that way.
We're not funded for those other agents.
Now, let me reel us back in if I can, because you're talking. You're welcome to, but just so we get you on the microphone. I think, Mr. Chairman, what she's saying is, if this committee takes the governor's recommendation and it funded in the mid-year budget, then she would be funded for the 258 agents. She's funded right now, or the GBI is funded right now for the 244 you have in process. That's why we've asked all of our agencies for authorized, filled, and funded positions, and we're getting those in from all of our agencies by
what we have authorized is in fact filled.
We have authorized. Let me see if I understand.
Yeah.
You actually have authorized positions that are not funded and filled. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we have more positions authorized than we have funded, and that is, from what I understand, and I'm new to sitting in this chair, but that is a practice that has happened in the past.
Right.
That the General Assembly has funded a percentage. I've heard other departments tell me 92%. Some have said 80-some%, because basically there is a situation where there's always going to be some level of positions that aren't filled due to turnover. But
what we've appropriated, to put that.
Yes, sir.
What we've appropriated has been used in that manner for those slots that are all filled.
That is correct, sir. But to be clear here, the 12 agents we're hiring now, we have the funding to fill those positions. The number is always fluid, because we have agents that are retiring, personnel that are retiring, and then and that creates a vacancy. We may or may not have the money, even though the agent's leaving, to fill those positions, because there is a payout when someone retires. The agency incurs. We have to do a payout, so the number will change.
Good. That concludes our questions, and I think you can tell we want to get at a little bit lower level of granularity than perhaps you have before, and that's not anything that you've done wrong for us today. In fact, you're helping us get there. Let me say this as we move on to our next presenter. If you would get with Michael, I think he's on our budget staff, to make sure that he has a detailed breakdown of the additional items that in our tracking document are 29.6.1.2 and .3, and I think he's already probably communicated that with you. The last thing I'll just mention, and I know folks aren't going to have it today, but I'll just mention it now so that I don't have to mention it later, is as we get these handouts from you guys, if you send them into the office or hand them out to committee, it would be really helpful to us if much like what happens on the House floor, when you pass anything out, somebody's got a contact card on them. I think it'd be a good idea if we just had a name and a number somewhere on the cover page, so that the committee members, when they get a handout, they know who they need to get back to, because we see a lot of different people from a lot of different, from the same agency. We'd know who would be the point of contact if we had a question about that. Now, I know, don't anybody go out of the room and try to get that done on anything you're handing us today. That'll just be a go-forward position. I think it would help us to more succinctly be able to get our questions asked and answered. Thank you very much, Director.
Yes, sir.
And we'll be talking to you again, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. I guess let me just make sure. Is anybody pressed for time? We had the Administrative Office of the Courts on our agenda is next. Is anybody not in a hurry? Commissioner?
Wow. I thought I was following Vernon all the time here.
You're mighty welcome to do that. Please.
I think it's a good discussion. We'll continue a little bit. What's really interesting about what Vernon shows you is that there's a little bit of a dynamic to the meth versus cocaine piece. You know, judges, from Dr. Spears' viewpoint, he is our consultant at Georgia State University on what's happening inside our system. Judges tend not to probate methamphetamines as often as they do other drugs. That's a dynamic, and that explains why, as we look at our prison system, we're averaging somewhere between 250 to 300 per month in growth. And the numbers, I think, that Director Keenan pointed out sort of verifies that. Our budget director passed out to you copies of the issue on position counts that was raised previously. It sort of explains what Chairman Martin was explaining. That is that we have a set of authorized positions that we're supposed to have, but by practice we've only been funded somewhere around 8% of our requirement as a practice, and you can see the difference between funding. We're a little high right now, but we watch that number closely. We do not have a hiring freeze in the Department of Corrections, but we have told our staff to return to the 8% lapse number. So we're watching those who are under, who are over 8%, to make sure that they stay in compliance and we finish the year where we're supposed to be. We see this as part of, I suppose, our fair share of the pain as we try to fund all the programs that we have. We love to, like I'm sure everybody else, to have all of those positions funded. It gives a lot more flexibility. But your prison system is not at risk. We're doing fine. Also, you see the CO position. Someone asked about that the last time around. We're right at about 9,000. You see the vacancy rate is closer to 8%. We've had an aggressive effort to fill those positions, and thanks to last year, those security personnel average about a 5.9% pay increase, and I think that explains why we've had much more success this past year in recruiting and retaining correction officers. But as I pointed out to you all the last time we were here, that did not change the bottom line. So as we recruit in the future, the correction officer pay will go back to being $23,600, and there is where we're going to have problems sustaining the force in the future. I think during the fall and summer one, we provided you all some feedback in terms of a white paper that gave you a little bit of discussion as to what we think our requirements were as far as what would be the optimum pay for these correction officers, and we'll generate that, since we didn't have the entire committee together, and get you copies of that. We also share with you the total probation officer positions, what we again authorize and what we are filled to, and then the central office positions. And we're trying to lead by example. In the central office, we have 71 positions that and we have a vacancy rate of over 14%. We are trying to posture ourselves as we move forward down the road to leverage technology to save some of the requirements for personnel. So that gives you an overview of that. On the second page, you all had questions about the bed counts, and we broke those numbers down to you so that you can see how we're doing, to give you an overview of that. Those were the major points you all asked me the last time I was here, and subject to your questions, I'll take any additional questions you all might have.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Does the committee have any questions of the Commissioner?
In seeing this, it does appear that the boot camp inmate population is drastically down from what
Yes.
it was at one time. What's the dynamics of that? I mean,
Well,
that was at one time a very effective program. We put these in a lot of places, but the
We've
model
learned
has
some
changed.
lessons from boot camp, and this time around the governor is working with us to improve. What happened is, if you remember, when Governor Miller was a proponent of that program, we set up a lot of these boot camps, but we didn't have good programming in them. We have come forward and briefed the governor on a program we call Boot Camp Plus, and that program is going to be additional drug resources. The governor's given us additional money so that we'll bring these boot campers in the next time around. We're going to give them 6 months of intensive drug treatment while they're with us. And then afterwards, there's a follow-up component, an aftercare component to that, so when we send them home. So the judges who are putting them in there can expect that we'll have a more robust drug treatment component of it. That's why it failed. I mean, nationally, the program failed because of the lack of programming. It's one thing to yell at them and scream and make them stand at attention, but if you don't have effective programming to go along with it, you have challenges. So I'm expecting you'll see an improvement in those stats here shortly.
Okay. One other question on something else. I continue to hear of how many of our mental health patients are ending up in
prison. Yeah.
Prison. I don't see a request. I see the things for the catastrophic health care claims, but is there anything we need to do to help address that so that it at least gets handled at some point, if it's whether it's in prison or in our, I mean, we need to adequately fund go back and put the money in the mental health centers.
Yes.
But once they're with you, they're with you.
Yes, sir. And I think
don't you need something this year? I mean, that's increased a fair amount.
Yes, sir. And that's going to, as you'll see in the 08 budget, the governor has put in there some additional funding for mental health specialists. As you know, in the Department of Corrections, we have 7,500 on our mental health caseload as compared locked up as compared to 2,000 in DHRs that are locked up. Indeed, we've become sort of that place where we have our mental health population. We have recommended to the governor, and he has authorized us to do a request for information currently to see if we might establish as a replacement facility, a mental health facility that brings the mental health population together in such a way we can do a more effective job with them. For example, in Mississippi and Florida, what they've done is consolidated the mental health into a handful of prisons. Right now, our mental health population is scattered between 31 of our 40-state prisons. That sort of dissipates our effectiveness. Once we get them there, what we're hoping to do is to fix them, so to speak, and then push them back out. But that is something we've received authorization, and we're actively putting together that RFI to see if we can do that. What I'm telling you is that we have 33 psychiatrists on the Department of Corrections payroll. I'm not so sure we don't have the resources internally, and what we really need to do is to reorganize so that we can organize along functional line and be more effective.
Let's also track those when they go back, of what we do with them when they get back out.
Yes, sir.
And that needs to be a whole part of this process that we're looking at. But of course, what now that they have been in situations where they've ended up with you in your department, but we need to figure out a better way.
And sir, I got to tell you, the governor commissioned a reentry program to get right at what you said. We have a policy that says when mental health people who get out and they're on their psychotropic drugs, they generally should be led to the CSBs where they will receive treatment. As a practice, we've not been very effective in making that happen, and as a result, the reentry task force has established some performance measures for myself and the CSB to make sure we're getting them where they can get their psychotropic drugs.
But many of the CSBs have been cut where they can't. I mean, those programs have been cut in many of those as well. We need to have a more comprehensive plan for that, as it turns out. Thanks.
I'm going to ask my assistant to pass out you these handouts real quick. This is the graduate article from the Rome News Tribune that talks about the effectiveness of day reporting centers and working on behalf of men and women who have meth addiction. It's a poignant statement by one of the young ladies who are now in college, who graduated from that program, who has talked about how more effective sometime it is, rather than locking them up and throwing away the key, it would be to take these people in a day reporting center environment. The first month, detox them, and then the next month to have them report every morning on their way to their jobs, and then test them every other day. But you keep the family structure, the community structure around them, and keep her working. That is a much more effective way, we believe, to manage this 250 to 300 that are coming into our prison population every day, every month. Subject to your questions, Madam Chairman.
Are you finished,
Thank you.
Representative Porter? Okay, we also have a question from Chairman Day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jill. I appreciate that introduction. You have a radio voice. Commissioner, I want to follow up on something Mr. Porter brought up involving the CSBs. I guess, one, how responsive are they? What kind of follow-up is there, if any? And what is the typical response time that you might have in dealing with them, from the time that you might release somebody to the time they go back to the local community?
Representative Day, I probably would not do an effective job of speaking to that issue. I do know that the reentry task force identified that had been somewhat of a problem, that we needed a performance measure with them to ensure that they were seeing a number of our inmate returning ex-offenders as a part of their service to them. We can obviously we can get that information to you and pass it back to you at a later date, sir. See if we see it in trends and improvement there.
You have the floor, Chairman.
What would you say is to their timeliness in working with you? Have they been quick to respond to your requests? Have they been slow? Have they ignored you? Or?
No, I think that as the reentry task force suggests, there was a problem there, and I believe that we've taken that problem on, Representative Day, and I think we're addressing it. I probably ought to get some more information since we've done this and see if there's been some improvement for you and pass that back to you at a later date.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe next we have Representative Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioner. Noticing, as I was looking at the numbers, you got vacancy on CO of 7% or 680.
Yes, sir.
COs that are short. And you've got, and as we all know, that we've got escalating numbers with 103% over capacity. These 680, are these, you said that y'all don't have a freeze in place?
No, we do not have a freeze. Their lapse is right at 8%. They're right at their lapse right now. We are asking or directing that the other departments return to this 8% lapse factor. We do have some prisons that might be better off than others. Obviously, there are some communities where we recruit in better than others, and we're just trying to balance it right now.
Further question. Given the fact that, you know, our facilities are overpopulated right now, any idea about the necessity of increasing the numbers of the COs, given the morale factor because of the low pay and overworked?
We are, as we add fast-track beds, we have a bed to CO ratio. So when you give us money to start up, say, the 525 beds we're about to start up at Johnson State Prison, that comes with resources to buy the COs too. So you will see our number of authorized and field positions slide up proportionally to the new beds that we're bringing on.
Is there any current right now, or y'all, is there any overtime that's being computed in? We have a lot of COs that have to work overtime.
We had some serious overtime problems earlier at GSP, and we are addressing those by reducing some of the infrastructure challenges we have. That I'm not sure if y'all ever been to Reedsfield in the Georgia State Prison down. That's an old 30s infrastructure, pretty much what you see in the movies. And we had a hard time keeping staff on board there. I'm happy to announce that in L building, I think Representative Powell, you perhaps have been there, a dungeon type of facility with bars and things that are akin to what you see in movies. We are beginning to move people out of there into our new Jackson high max facility that you all gave us funding to build several years ago. So that's built, and we're beginning to move them out of that bad situation. We have now, corresponding with that, we've seen a drop in the amount of overtime, but we will still pay overtime in some of our prison situations simply because there are difficult environments to recruit in. Yes, sir.
One further question. The work programs, and, I've always been a proponent of, working inmates, whether
Yes, sir.
during the end of their sentence.
And we appreciate your support for that, too.
Getting them ready for reentry and trying to bring them back into the real world, and that rehabilitative part of it. I've also been I've been a big proponent for years about working inmates, not
Yes,
just
sir.
letting them sit idle in the facility.
Absolutely.
If y'all had rose the number of these vacancies in the CA, would that perhaps give y'all a little bit more latitude about working inmates during that initial part of confinement, like doing public works on the roads, and whether it's picking up trash or doing just anything to enhance the state and local communities as opposed to them just being sitting inside the facilities?
We would probably experience some increase in the numbers of people that we could work. Obviously, one of our main priorities is working the inmates. We've learned that 51% self-report they never worked before. A couple of things that we have done to facilitate that, of course, with your support for the pie bill, we're very close to implementing our first pie project at Arendelle. We're doing some renovation to the old Bluebud factory, which you're familiar with up there, and we hope to have the ladies doing swashes as soon as we can get the Department of Labor to rule on a price wage, and we're excited about them working. In addition, we're in collaboration with other potential pie partners, which I'm not at liberty to talk to you about right now, but as I mentioned earlier, we are, in fact, talking to several communities about working inmate labor as part of those programs. The beauty of those programs is that they pay back for their room and board as part of, they get prevailing wage, but they also are required to pay back for room and board, and that allows us a little bit more flexibility in the budget. And finally, last year, when we got the money to open those 7 pre-release centers that were those 200-bed facilities that we didn't have funds to open before, we opened those as work camps. And so we now have over 1,000 more inmates in our system who are able to get out, and some of you all from your communities probably seen them picking up papers and this type of stuff that we did not have the flexibility to do in the past. The bottom line is that we're working a number of inmates, but indeed, if we had more positions filled, there would be an opportunity to work more inmates possibly.
Chairman Knox.
Commissioner, congratulations on the day reporting success. I think that's probably one of the best programs that we've started on in a long time, and I know y'all are doing a great job. I had the good fortune to be at one of the openings of one of the day reporting centers. My question about it is, how do you get the money for that? Where does it come from in the budget? Are we going to have a request for that? I know I don't see anything in 2007. I guess, are we going to have a request for any additional funds for those operations in 2008?
Actually, we're looking at a couple different locations right now for opening them. One of the things is you would look at the numbers, for example, in some of our beds where we've underutilized beds, we have the opportunity to convert some of those missions over, and we've done that in different cases. It takes about $500,000 to stand up a day reporting center and operate it, and that's just a $10 a day operating cost that we have for that facility. We have in mind that we will convert 1 or possibly 2 facilities that are underutilized in other areas over to day reporting centers, and we will be able to use the money for that purpose versus using it for other things.
Thank you. Commissioner, I don't see any further questions. I appreciate you coming for us today. Let me just, as you depart, also ask you and your staff to make sure Holly has the information that she needs in detail for the specific items that are on our tracking sheet in 18. Well, I won't go through them. You know what they are, the additional items. And I think she probably has most of that. She has indicated that, not to put you on the spot, but Holly, do you, anything else that we're not working on that you need?
No, Becky got me everything else.
All. Okay. I don't have any reason we're not headed in the right direction, but I think that this might be one of the last times we're together before we come out with a 07 recommendation. So I just want to make sure we have all the information. I appreciate you guys helping us with that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll go then, if the committee's ready to go straight forward, we'll go with the Administrative Office of the Courts next. I forgot you're supposed to be introduced.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You only had 2 items, I think, in our amended budget that you had questions about. One was the County and Municipal Probation Advisory Council, and the other was the Georgia Courts Automation Commission. I'm going to speak to the County Municipal Probation Advisory Council, and then Judge Tim Pate is here to talk to the Georgia Courts Automation Commission amended budget request. You all have a handout on the, we call it SIMPAC, everything's got an acronym. We did go back. One of the questions was, what kind of impact has there been since the passage of Senate Bill 44 last year? As you see, we've noted pre-Senate Bill 44, we had 43 private probation companies registered with the council and serving 640 courts with 819 employees, and we have to run background checks on all of those employees for those probation departments, so that's a workload issue there. The number of offenders that were supervised were 228,000, and they collected over $20 million in the second quarter of 2006. After the passage of Senate Bill 44, in addition, we have 49 private providers registered and 49 governmental entity providers registered. So those would be cities or counties who run their own probation.
Hang on a second. Yes, sir.
Some idea of where the information is, and also
Okay. We're working on your handouts.
I'm sorry, mine is a 2-page handout.
I only had 2 of them.
I'm trying to...
I thought I gave you a whole stack. I'm sorry.
No.
Here.
Can somebody put us on the right page in the tracking document? I'm railing it through with my glasses. Page 5? I must have looked up. Page 5 in the tracking document, Chairman Day. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, under judicial. I apologize.
No, that's fine. We just
everybody had the handout.
we've got some. We need more copies for working on. Okay, no, I think we're good.
I've got
Chairman Day, do you have what you need?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. Please.
Okay. So, I mean, to sum it up, in addition, the workload has doubled since the passage of Senate Bill 44. We don't have double the employees that we're running background checks on and taking applications on, but we do have double the number of probation entities. And so once the third quarter reports are in, I think we'll be able to see the increase in fine and fee collections, as well as the number of folks supervised by these misdemeanor probation entities. Do you have any questions?
Chairman Willard.
Hey. Hi, Ms. Nesbitt. Tell me on the Senate Bill 44, when did that become effective as far as the need to start doing that?
July 1.
And how far are you into the process at this point?
We're 6 months into the process. The registration began in October. It was typically when the registration process takes place for all private probation entities. So beginning July 1, when the bill went into effect, we started conducting trainings around the state for the governmental probation entities to talk to them about the rules and regs. They had to promulgate rules and regulations in compliance with Senate Bill 44, and so all of that has been done. But there are still ongoing registration.
How many positions are you seeking to fill with this?
We're looking for 3 full-time compliance analysts and 1 administrative assistant.
Is that going to be a permanent, or is there some kind of sunset to it? Or?
I think that it would probably be permanent because I see this as only growing. I mean, we really, right now, we have one staff person, and we are really struggling just to keep up with the registrations, just to know who is out there operating and running criminal background checks on the folks who are acting as probation officers. There really is not much of anything else going on, and I'm sure you all have heard constituent complaints. We get complaints a lot, and we really don't have the staff to follow up on those complaints or to check compliance issues with the rules and regs or their contract requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, one of the things I want to talk to Ms. Nesbitt about was something I memoed to you this morning. I don't know if you got it.
I have not yet, sir.
Well, may I bring it up? It's dealing with the child support controversy and the fact that this began as of January 1. Ms. Nesbitt, would you mind touching on this issue? Because I asked you to look into a problem that we're hearing, and this deals with the bar in Georgia, the courts in Georgia, the pro se litigants in Georgia, inability to get information.
Chairman Willard asked me to get some information on how we could create a help desk. You met Cindy Moss, Chairman Martin, and talked with Cindy Moss about how could we create a help desk, if you will, for the judges and for pro se litigants who are having a hard time putting their information into the calculator and dealing with some of the questions around the implementation of the child support guidelines. I've got that estimate together for Chairman Willard. We are able to pull down 2/3 of the money in federal funds. What we would need in actual state funds is the $48,840. The $484, I think, is what it came out to be.
48,000.
Right, and that would be for 2 staff people and a 1-800 line to take those calls from judges and the general public.
I bring it up, Mr. Chairman. I would ask the committee to give consideration for this need. It is a almost emergency type need due to the implementation of this law and not having in place systems to help give guidance on a totally new approach for dealing with child support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know Ms. Moss and I have spoken over some things that they ongoing work that they are doing, and the organization is providing that work with us for the state. And we are to talk again tomorrow afternoon, so appropriate time.
Thank
you. Committee have further questions?
This time I'll ask Judge Pate to come up if you don't have any other questions for me. He's with the Georgia Courts Automation Commission.
Good afternoon. With me is the director of the Courts Automation Commission, Mr. Nolan, and he's got some packets that we hope will be beneficial for y'all to have some kind of information concerning what the Courts Automation Commission is and what it's doing and its budget request. Let me just give you an opportunity, hopefully, if you need to hear a little bit about the history and what is the Automation Commission. Automation Commission was created in 1991 by legislation as a separate body, legislatively created and attached to the Supreme Court of Georgia. It has its own separate budget, and its budget is basically under the Judicial Council budget. When it was created, its primary obligation back in 1991 and its primary approach was to just get computers on judges' desks and get somebody to automate the courts. That evolved over a number of years and basically ended up with the Automation Commission having quite a large staff and doing and a budget of over $3 million. There became a good bit of criticism about how the Commission was operating, and about 4 years ago the Commission decided, because of all the technical aspects of trying to supervise, when the Commission itself is made up of really volunteer judges who are appointed by the Supreme Court Chief Justice, about 10 guys who are volunteering, and also women who are volunteering as judges to supervise this, it got a little bit out of hand. So the staff and all that activity was transferred over to the AOC. What the decision was made was to have the Commission be more of a policy-setting board than an actual hands-on getting things particularly done when it comes to how many computers you give people and how the development of software products and that kind of thing. So about 4 years ago, that was a major transition. What was left in the budget was about $320,000 for the commission operations itself. Initially, we had no employees, and we had an agreement with AOC for staff support. What unfortunately was happened is that the staff support was also staff for AOC, and we decided about 2 years ago to shift that staff support over to the commission. But what has happened in the last 3 years is the commission, in changing its operation, changed how it did business. And the first thing I would like to bring your attention to is really on the back tab and the last blue tab about the second page over, which is a page that looks like this, and you'll see on the top right it says Guiding Principles. The Courts Automation Commission, one of the first things we did was to make sure that we started operating with some guiding principles, and I'd like to point out the guiding principles that we established over 3 years ago, and that is that we would apply best business practices to what we did. Anything that we used in terms of state money would be money that would be applied for a statewide projects. There would be no expenditures of funds that only inured to the benefit of a particular county or anything like that. Everything we did would then have to be for the benefit of the state. You're using state monies, we're going to get benefit from the state. What we did, and what this page reflects, is we sat down and did a strategic plan. Out of this strategic plan, we again established our principles, our vision, and established strategic objectives and key initiatives. And we also established that we wanted to make sure we had ways to measure whether or not we were successful in doing what we're doing. If you look at the next page, you'll get some indication of what we did in FY06 and what that plan indicated. And part of what we are doing is trying to make sure that each class of court has its own strategic IT plan. In FY06, we conducted sessions with each class of court, with the IT members and the judges and the clerks and the IT directors of each class of court, and each class of court came up with its own strategic plan. We then also conducted other sessions that allowed us to come up with the data definitions, council data definitions, and out of these plans, we plan this year. What we're looking at is a session in which we derived our judiciary-wide strategic plan. We have accomplished the data definitions were accomplished last year. We then go into the creation of standards and architecture out of those data definitions. And we also, what we want to do is follow up with each class of court to make sure that they're following through with their strategic plan. So that as a policy board, we are trying to establish plans that everybody follows. They understand where they're going, what their key initiatives are, and then to give them technical support and to ourselves obtain expert advice from consulting firms to assist everybody in getting their plans in line and together so that the judiciary has a consistent statewide initiation of its IT plans. The budget, if you look at our budget, you will see that the budget is pretty much tied to the initiatives we have stated in the key initiatives, and that the initiatives then move into a down the line in FY07, FY08 budget analysis and budget requests.
I have, the committee may have questions, but I have one. I'm looking on page 2 of your Court Automation Commission. You have a request for $74,330, and up until today, what I thought we were doing is we had a specific program that was going for.
Well, that's the what's it called? Software certification program.
Well, I mean, looking at your numbers here, it's the push number to get to your budget. What happened? Let me finish if I can. It looks like you had an approved budget of $326,000, and if we add 74,330, we get to 400,717. What specific item in that budget did you add to account for this money? What are we buying for the additional $74,000?
What basically we had, and it's a result of us 10 judges not knowing much about budgets, but in essence what had happened is the year before when I said we added George Nolan as a staff member, what happened is that staff monies came out of the GCAC budget, and it wasn't transferred in essence from AOC. Even though we got him from AOC, what we agreed to and what we ended up having to do is pay for his salary out of that. And so the shortfall came out of the fact that we didn't get a transfer of funds over from AOC to cover his salary.
All right.
So our prediction on what we would have expenditure-wise to cover these programs really came up as a shortfall in that amount.
Okay. But again, I don't see an individual or combination of itemized numbers in FY07 that account for $74,330. When I see something in mid-year like this and it talks about software certification, the way it had been represented to me previously, and I thought this committee is, we had something that we were doing, and now we're adding something else, and we need $74,000. Well, what I'm hearing, I mean, I just heard the different answer to that is we did more than we had money for. Again, not placing blame, at this point. I'm just trying to get to what we're buying, if you will, for the $74,000.
Well, actually, what we're buying is we're having to pay for the position that we acquired from the previous year.
So you borrowed somebody over from the administrative office of the courts.
Right. We moved George.
Did they give us that salary back? I'll ask them in a minute.
They didn't move it to our budget. I don't know if they gave it back to y'all. If they were supposed to.
Anybody while he's up there kind of want to venture a guess at that? If you would, just no. I mean, I don't mean to direct y'all over there pointing fingers, but just so they can record it. Yes, ma'am.
That was part. For those of you who were on the committee last year, we took a significant cut in our budget last year, close to $1 million, and so that was part of the budget cut. That was part of those loss of funds.
Okay, that's so it's you didn't get to keep that salary. It's just he didn't get it. That's the. Okay. What's the salary of that individual? Serialized. What's the salary of that individual? Fully loaded. Yes, sir.
This is actually a reflection of, I think the agreement we had right now is 3/4 of that salary. And then in FY08, there's an additional $27,000, I think, that's supposed to cover the other quarter, so that we absorb all of it out of our budget.
Okay. I think we'll probably want to talk about that again, but I know where I'm at. So, committee, have any further questions? We have judicial council items that have been brought forward by Ms. Nesbitt or Mr. Pate. Any questions? If not, then I'd ask you guys the same thing. And I know we've already been doing this, but just to repeat again, to continue to work with Michael, to make sure he gets what he needs, specifically on the items that have ads, so that we can justify. You guys are on our tracking document 6.4 and have a number of items that go down there, so that we have the details underneath those things. It makes it easier for us to enter into that agreement that you mentioned earlier if we know what's down in there. So I appreciate very much you guys continuing to work with us on getting that information.
I appreciate y'all.
Yes, sir.
We did have a conversation with Charlie Walker and Michael back in October and presented all the stuff that we had at that time to them, so that y'all should have something.
Well, he may well have it. I mean, he hasn't let me know that he doesn't have anything. So it's a general statement.
Make sure that we were still communicating.
Yes, sir. You'll know otherwise, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have two more groups here. I had them in order. Public safety. If you don't mind, Colonel, I suspect that if you don't mind, driver services might be a bit shorter, because I know Chairman Day is going to have some questions. I'm not getting ahead of him, but about some public safety things and what we can do. If you don't mind, we'll go with driver services and have the commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologize for your Colonel, but thank you.
You got it. I'm sorry.
I thanked you and apologized to the Colonel there.
Well, I think the Colonel's going to be fine. You probably won't get a ticket on the way home if you're brief.
Good. I will only take as much time as you guys need. Hopefully we got you the information that you requested. We had 3 items in the supplemental. The first was an item of $600,000 for a independent validation and verification system, and for a license feasibility study. And the other 2 were startup funds, of which, I'm sorry, Chairman Day looks like. Okay.
We're co-working with you. We're passing out things as you guys are coming up, because we
just wait one
didn't
second.
get the packets together to build packets for folks, so that's what we're doing.
Okay. I apologize for jumping right in.
Yep.
The last 2 items was the startup cost for, the first one was for 2 new customer service centers, one in Loganville and one in Clayton. And the last item was the startup costs related to the 10 investigators for the Secure ID initiative. Each of those startup packages are broken down on the sheet that you have in front of you as far as regular operating, motor vehicle, equipment, computer charges, and telecommunications. As you can see, as I mentioned in the first briefing, these are all one-time costs to get it started. For example, telecommunications, installing the telephone lines, computer charges, purchasing all the computers to go into the center. Equipment will be the furniture, the desk, the counters, things of that nature, the tables, the testing site equipment. The motor vehicle purchases, we buy the mid-size small vehicle, the Chevy Impalas, and it's 1 per center, as you can see, so just 2 vehicles there. And regular operating for the examiners is just uniforms and supplies, as well as the security system in the center, and then small equipment for them to utilize. All of this typically is spent when you open up a center, and then it's taken back out of the budget. So I believe the intent of the Governor's office, their recommendation is to put it in as one-time expenditures in the supplemental budget here, versus putting it in the out year and then taking it back out. Are there any specific questions I can answer, Mr. Chairman, on these?
Chairman Day.
On item number 2, you have provide funds for one-time cost for 26 additional positions. Are those positions being paid as they are currently, or are they being paid what you think is market value?
Ooh, tough question. The 26 positions are not in the current budget, but they'll be in the out-year recommendation by the Governor. And as far as the salaries go, as most positions throughout the state, we do have a difficult time recruiting and retaining. What is the market value for examiners? That's a hard thing to say right now. We just haven't studied it, and it's something that hopefully our merit system connection with the new commissioner over there, as well as our office, can get together and work on that to come up with what the market bears. It may be that what we're paying is the market. I don't have that answer for you today.
Follow-up questions? If you have a high rate of turnover, does that suggest to you that you might not be paying market value?
It suggests 2 things. It is an entry-level position. Kathy, what is the starting salary for an examiner? $20,413. Oftentimes we get the entry salary as being an issue. Sometimes when we do exit interviews, so I read each and every one of those. Sometimes
why do they leave?
I'm sorry?
Why are they leaving?
It's a multitude of reasons. Salary always comes up, but then you have to look beyond the salary to see is what we're paying really what it should be. And some things come up that indicate that maybe it's not, that we require too much, because we ask for our examiners to be experts in all the licensing laws to ensure that we're doing our best we can to ensure that we're giving the right person the ID. I just don't know what the market would bear for that type position. We do have about a 30% turnover, and I have asked, we have a new HR director in our agency, And I've asked her, what should we expect in this type of position? And I've been led to believe that in the retail industry that 30% is pretty average. She's come back to tell me that she thinks that what I have been told in the past is not totally accurate. So we're trying to look at some other entities that are in the retail industry. I know that's not a perfect example of what we do, but it is a high turnover, entry-level type position to see what does the market bear for that and what is their turnover rate compared to our turnover rate.
I would agree with you that to use the retail market or the private sector market as a benchmark for public safety related stuff is not a good analogy.
Yes, sir. I was not referring to our investigators down at the bottom section. I was referring more to our examiners that we're hiring, and we do kind of tie them into the we do tie them into the public safety arena, but they are not sworn officers. Our examiners are not. Our investigators, being a small unit, we do not have as much turnover as we do in the examiner realm. We only today have, I believe, 12 investigators hired, Kathy, is that correct? And most of them have been with us for a couple of years now. We've had a few turnover here and there, but it has not been a mass transit as it has in our examiners as far as our frontline people.
Any further questions of the Commissioner from the committee? Any further questions? Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Colonel, I was close. It wasn't very long. As the committee will move on to the public safety.
Yay.
Well, contrary to popular belief, I believe mine might even be faster than that unless I have a lot of questions to deal with, because as you know, we only have one supplemental 07 request, and that's for $286,000 for a database for the post council. As most of you know, there are several agencies that are administratively attached to the Department of Public Safety, and most of them used to be a part of it, and after they left, we still retained the financial and human resource function. Post council is one of them, but we have a representative here from post council if you have any questions that you'd like to address specifically about the database. Other than that, I know that you asked for a lot of information the other day, and I hope we've given you everything that you want, and I'd certainly be glad to attempt to answer any questions you might have.
27. Representative Powell.
Thank you. Colonel, I'm sorry I don't have that sheet that you had sent out the other day, but can you tell them how many authorized positions do y'all have? Colonel, what's CEOs for y'all's definition?
Sir?
What are CEOs by y'all?
Communications officers.
Yeah, I do, but I'm going to pass right now, just sort of digesting this.
Yes, sir. Committee have further questions?
One quick thing.
Yes, sir.
I guess go back to what I was asking earlier of the numbers. Are we talking about in your appropriation actually funding? Is it a different number than what you have as authorized?
Right. We're funded for about 870 troopers.
And so where you got 763, you're funded for 800.
It's about 100 difference.
About 860, okay. And coming down the line, same thing, your telephone operators?
Pretty much. obviously the large number is the money difference isn't nearly as much. But
Okay. So your funding, though, is still a good bit over what you have.
oh yeah, significantly.
And then when you have in the year, what happens to those funds?
Well, what happens is we're not funded in other areas sufficiently. We haven't got any increase in for fuel or
Okay.
for maintenance in several years. So we've already run through this year all the money that we're allocated for fuel and maintenance. And
Okay.
what we do is we use the personnel monies over there. Plus, we don't have a sufficient number of radio operators. Last year, we spent $1 million in overtime for radio operators and using contract operators. We have a lot of operators that leave us and go to 911 centers. And in their exit interviews, they say they like working for us and they like to work on a regular basis, but the money draw from the 911 centers is higher, so they work there full-time and then they work for us part-time.
And the last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, do you feel if there's something done to improve the structure of the salaries for these people that you're going to be able to fill what your least appropriate number of slots would be?
Well, I go back to what I said the other day at the joint appropriations meeting. It all boils down to our entry-level salary is competitive. There's just no light at the end of the tunnel. You start there, and I was looking the other day. I've got it broken down by individual for all the people in our agency, and everybody that's a trooper that was hired from 1997 through 94 make exactly the same amount of money. It's $34,598, which they've gone up $3,000 in 10 years, and the only thing they have to look forward to is getting promoted, and that happens only if you're competitive academically, and if somebody quits or retires that's ahead of you, and that's not very promising oftentimes.
Hope you're a governor's driver.
Colonel, we have a couple more questions. Let me just, I guess, capture something that I think you just said, and I think if Commissioner Donald here who tells us in corrections that we're not going to be able to fix in 07. We may not even fix it in 08 because you don't have it in the submittal. But I would like us, if I'm fortunate enough to get to serve here another year or two, for us to see the money, for you to be able to present us a budget, allocate some money in the right places. According to Commissioner Donald's information he had sent us, we've underfunded him, if you will, in utilities by as much as $10 million, and yet he's been able to make the budget work. That means money that's been funded that this legislature thinks is being funded for another program is used to pay the gas bill. What I'm hearing you say is you have troopers, you have 100 less troopers than you're funded, but you do that to fill up the tank. Now, kudos to you for running the department and keeping the cars on the road, but you shouldn't have to get your budget filled up that way, and we're going to endeavor to help you do that. Because I think that's what Chairman Willard was wondering there is, if you got 100 folks less, and shouldn't we get a credit back at the end of the year? And you're telling me that gas prices went up, didn't they?
They've gone up significantly. Over the last 5 years, we've lost $16 million a year in funding.
I understand, and we're going to try to get that back on track. But just so the committee understands that you're not necessarily squirreling that personnel money away and doing anything with it other than keeping the cars on the road.
Well, this year we're running a trooper school, which has got 41 people in it, and we didn't ask for an appropriation. We used that with the monies that we had left over from personal services for those 100 positions.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. I know we got 3 more questions. I apologize. Members of the committee, I don't remember what order, so I'm just going to start down here. Number 27.
Thank you, Colonel. Now that I got the numbers, I can ask some questions. Would you tell us the 953 now under the trooper ranks? Is that all troopers from privates on up through the colonel?
That's everybody.
Out of that number, could you tell us how many are actually funded? You're authorized for 953. How many positions are actually funded?
I just said I think it's about 870 that we have funded.
Out of that number, how many are considered to be officers that are not on the road, that hold administrative positions?
There aren't very many.
On loan to other agencies.
We've cut back everybody that's gone. We've taken back all the people we had on task forces. We've taken everybody that was assigned outside of our agency and put them all back on the road.
All of them?
I think we may have 2 or 3 outside.
How many of those numbers of the 772 that are currently filled are on the road? The ones that I'm trying
in our headquarters right now, there are probably about 14 uniform members. 5 years ago, there were probably 25 or 30. I've cut the rank structure down. We used to have 2 deputy commissioners, 7 majors. We're down to 1 deputy commissioner and 2 majors now. We've cut everything at the top that we can. We try to look at being as effective we can with the money that we have, put the most people out on the highways. We'd work holiday weekends, myself and everybody else that has ever gone through trooper schools with our department hits the road.
So at any given time, all 772 that are filled right now can be out on the road?
Well, we have some that are administrative positions. We have some legislative mandates. We do all the intoximeter certifications across the state, which are the machines that every city and sheriff's department have that measure alcoholic content in people, and it's our responsibility to go out. Every 3 months we have to calibrate them. We have a group that does that. There are probably about 8 of those. We have the safety education unit, which is probably 6 or 7, 8 people across the state that go out and speak to civic clubs, schools, and that kind of thing about highway safety. And that's basically about it. The rest of them, we have an aviation unit. We've got 14 pilots and several civilian maintenance people now, probably 6 or 8. But everybody else is on the highway in some capacity.
So we've got, would you say 600, 650?
About that.
Probably 600 that are actually out running the roads.
Counting the supervisory people and captains and lieutenants, typically there are 9 captains and 18 lieutenants in the state. That there's a captain and 2 lieutenants over each troop, which runs from 5 to 7 posts. And they're responsible for the administration and inspections and make sure that everybody in the state's operating in the same fashion and that they're abiding by all the rules and regulations. And they do a great majority of the investigations that we get for complaints against our personnel.
Because of the shortage of communications officers, how many of our troopers are actually having to man the radios as opposed to being out on the road?
I gave that figure the other day, and as I recollect, I think that we had about 4,000 shifts last year that we had to put troopers on the radio.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is how many. I was concerned the other day, Commissioner, when the Department of Transportation, when they did their presentation to the Full Appropriations Committee, and I thought it was interesting. After 18 years, first time I'd heard DOT get into public safety issues about the rise in fatality, in the raise in fatality rates. Of course, they weren't pointing any fingers, but it's something that I've been concerned about for years, and that's, you know, what's happened to the Department of Public Safety through the budgetary process, that y'all have been treated somewhat, y'all have not been kept up. The numbers hasn't been kept up for y'all, and those are the things that I'm concerned about. I'm trying to get around to that point. How many folks do we really have that are out there doing the job? You were sworn in what year, Colonel?
69.
You've got a great historical perspective of it. When you were sworn into the Georgia State Patrol in 1969, could you give us, for instance, of the post that you say where you were started at? Do we have more troopers today than we did then? In 1969 in Savannah, Georgia, how many troopers was assigned in Savannah, Georgia in 1969 to work the roads of that area?
Well, since you've already asked me that question outside, there were 10.
And how many are assigned in Savannah, Georgia today?
8.
Thank you.
Colonel, thank you very much for being here with us. I learned something from my local law enforcement people. It was very disturbing to me this past week that I did not know, and that was that our radio system, I'm guessing it's our 911 or whatever, does not talk to your troopers. And your guys are out there most times by themselves with very little backup except each other, limited resources, sometimes having to rely on local law enforcement to back them up. Is that prevalent all over the state, that the radio calibration?
Well, we operate off a V8 system, which is, about the time I came into play, and most of the major metropolitan areas and in some rural areas, they've gone to the 800 megahertz system, and they're not compatible. And you're probably aware of the incident that occurred down there, which we were very fortunate nobody got hurt. But we've been hoping for years that we would go to 800 megahertz, but there have been 7 studies done, and it's about a $300 million price tag statewide to put that in. It could probably be reduced some now to work together with some of the 8 areas that already have it. But as I spoke at the appropriation the other day, there's an initiative, and back when I was the Homeland Security Director, we were able to get some Homeland Security funds, and technology's done some dramatic things in the last couple of years, and there's a system in place now that will in effect meld those 2 systems together. And we've been able to do that complete with Homeland Security monies, and there's about 140 sites across the state that should be completed by the end of this year, which will help us significantly. The reason that I bring all that up is that I asked for about $1 million, and the governor's recommended that it be spent for T1 lines that would pay for all the T1 lines across the state for the system, which would include all the city police departments, all the sheriff's departments, state patrol, and GBI to be on that system to give us interoperable communications statewide.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman? I'm told, again, this from a local issue standpoint, I know you're responsible for the whole state, that for about, in our case, I think it's $20,000, and I intend to try to gin that up somehow or another. We can get enough radios to put in the cars that are on our megahertz system, to where at least our guys there can be talking to our sheriff's department and everything. Where would the funding go through? Would that go through your agency, or would that necessarily go through the city or county governments? I mean, the radios would go to your guys, but it's for communication with other folks. So I'm not sure how to.
What's happened in most parts of the state is the counties have done that for us, as they purchase the equipment. That occurs in Statesboro, Savannah, Brunswick, LaGrange, outside of Macon, L on the 800 megahertz systems, and most of them have bought. I've talked to Mr. McMichael. He and I serve on post council together, and he's discussed it with me, one of the county commissioners from your area. They're thinking about that.
Told me I better get it. They weren't going to give it to me.
Well, certainly we'd be glad to get it from whichever source it emanates.
Thank you. Number 26, Chairman Weller.
Colonel, if I understand what followed with Chairman O'Neill, we can tie in to the existing 800 megahertz systems that are now, most part, throughout the state. Is that right? So we would not be setting up our own separate 800 megahertz system, but just a matter of piling with them.
That's correct.
And really nominal cost. Very nominal cost.
When I was in Homeland Security 2.5 years ago, we could have done it for about $20 million. That would have covered 80% of the population in the state.
And do you have a feel of what we have now as far as state coverage? Because most of the local systems are going 800 megahertz, at least in metropolitan areas.
All the metro and some of the rural areas are going.
What's your percentage statewide coverage? First by geographical area, and then by population.
By population, it's probably 40%. Geographical area, it's probably only 15 or 20, and those are just guesstimates. Okay. The big cost for us is all the rural areas where you'd have to have towers.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, I really hope that you might provide the committee with a detailed explanation of where those funds go. I believe Mr. Willard asked a good question about where the money goes that's appropriated for the training of new recruits. You said gasoline. Any accounting that you can give for that, I think, would be very helpful to us.
The ones for new recruits don't go to gasoline. That covers the cost of sending them to trooper school. It costs us about $85,000 to train and equip one trooper. The school's 33 weeks. They get a car, uniforms, a wide variety of equipment, weapons, and that money for gas is just that our budget's pretty simple. 82% of it's for personal services, 10% for cars and maintenance, and 8% for everything else. And when we get a reduction, it's pretty obvious as to where those things have to occur. because unless we're going to shut down facilities or turn off radios or utilities.
It might be obvious to you. What I'm asking is that you sort of break it down so that we can better understand where appropriated money actually goes.
And I may be misunderstanding exactly what you're saying, Chairman David.
Okay. And Mr. Wendell, please correct me if I'm wrong. Your question was basically, where does the money...
You got appropriate money for troopers.
Oh, okay.
And yet not all that money was used for troopers. Then what were we lacking in?
Well, and I thought I answered that once, but gasoline has gone up significantly in the last 4 or 5 years, and we've never gotten any increase in the amount of money that we're allocated for fuel for our vehicles. It's probably gone from about $1 to about $2.10 at varying times, and we have to foot the bill for that. When we don't get any more money, we run out of it sooner. One of the other things I think that I mentioned was that we're paying almost $1 million a year in overtime for radio operators because we don't have a sufficient number, and it's cheaper to do that than put troopers on the radio. And vehicle maintenance. Our fleet's getting old. We've got a lot of cars that exceed 135,000 mile. I think last year we put in 12 new motors and about 40 or 50 transmissions, and the maintenance has gone up dramatically for the older vehicles. So that's where that extra money goes, is to try and keep our fleet running and keep personnel in the posts.
Thank you.
Any have further questions? Further questions? I know you. Let me drop back up to the one line on the that we had in the budget for the peace officers standards and training. I know I've talked with those folks, and the bright lights are shining in my face. I see some of them out there. I have a question about the timing of that, as to can we properly do that in this fiscal year? But let me say this to the committee, and I'll say it here in our recorded meeting. They've made a good case for me for the need for that software coming out of Clipper in a DOS environment that won't even run on some machines now. So if that money is anything done with in 07, it would be with the absolute assurance that it's going to go over into 08, and it will only that would only happen if it was in a situation where we couldn't encumber and actually make use of those funds. So I'm gonna say that. I told y'all when we were in the office, I gave y'all my commitment on that, and I'll just do it again in this public meeting, that if we do anything, one, you'll hear it from me first, and two, you'll know that I do believe, and I believe most of the members of this committee believe that is a necessary and reasonable expenditure for your department to continue to support police agencies around the state of Georgia. So if anyone sees anything about the movement of that money, it would only be because that is how we can best implement the solution that these folks need to do that. Now, you're welcome if you want to address that or address our conversation, just come over here so they can hear what you're saying. While she's coming up, members of the committee, this is a replacement, new software, so that they can basically keep track of all the certifications for post-certified officers across the state of Georgia, and I'll let them tell you about it, but it seems to be a most reasonable expenditure, and something that I think will make all of our agencies more efficient. And if we can do it in this fiscal year, we want to keep it right there. If we can't, we've got to be committed to providing these funds next year. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished committee members. I'm Ryan Powell. I'm the interim executive director of the Georgia Post Council. I appreciate you allowing us this opportunity to address you regarding this issue. As you're aware, it's the mission of Post to provide the citizens of Georgia with qualified, professionally trained, ethical, and competent peace officer professionals. We do so by setting the standards for training, certifying those officers who meet those minimum statutory requirements, and disciplining those officers who fail to uphold those standards that have been established by the legislature. To accomplish this mission, we are using a legacy system that's been running for about 13 years now. We feel we've been a good steward of the money appropriated, but we really are facing a dilemma these days with it. Since 1993, the officers in our database is nearly quadrupled. The number of certifications that we issue each year has nearly doubled. Our ability to make any changes to the system is pretty much null. We can't modify it in any way. Queries and reports are virtually impossible. Is not accessible outside of our headquarters, and we have investigators out in the field who need to be able to make changes, and we would ultimately like agencies to be able to make updates in the system. We are a paper-driven agency. All of our business processes revolve around paper being mailed to post. We process approximately 10,000 applications for various certifications each year. We open approximately 1,500 disciplinary cases on officers who have been accused of wrongdoing. By automating our application process, our certification specialists will be able to spend more time reviewing and validating those applications and spend less time on that data entry. We have over 1,000 agencies in the state that submit change of status, and these are promotions, marriage, name changes, demotions, anything along those lines. By having an agency enter this information through the internet, we will have more time to do those things that we need to, as well as reduce the amount of data entry errors. We hope you appreciate the struggles we're facing with this, and anything you can do, we sure appreciate it. And Mr. Chairman, we thank you for your commitment. And if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to try and address those.
Number 26, I believe, Chairman Willard.
I know most of the departments I'm looking at locally are going to an automated incident report system. Is this going to tie into that type of process?
No, sir. We deal with the records of the officers' employment and training.
Okay.
The entry of accident reports goes into the Department of Public Safety.
Do we have anything going on like that?
Well,
I mean,
resides with us. It's moved over to the Department of Transportation.
Incident report forms?
Oh, no, we have incident report forms that are online. That's correct. Incident report and accident reports, but we no longer are the final resting place.
Is it computerized? Is it okay? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Hard job you guys have at Post, and for the good job you guys are doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Currently, your system's run by DOS, isn't it?
It was designed to run on the MS-DOS platform, and up until Windows 98, MS-DOS is running in the background, and since XP has been out, it's really not designed to run that way, and we have some real issues with that.
Do they still have, at least amongst the living people who fix DOS-based machines?
Our machines aren't DOS-based machines. They're running on Windows XP, and we do our best to keep it running that way. It is network compatible, so each of the certification specialists do have access to it, but our main servers run on Unix, and it's the data is stored in that environment.
Thank you.
Just to make your case for you, that I think if they lose an index, they have to boot the whole database over to a Unix box and have it re-indexed, because that's the only thing that has enough horsepower, and then back downloaded into a DB environment for that Clipper application to use. So I just wanted to bring that up because we've talked about the implementation. They need a solution, and I want to be careful that we don't just throw $286,000 out there for somebody to spend on their behalf in the next few months, because this budget may not get approved until April. I don't want them having a rush to encumber the money in May and June, use it or lose it sort of situation. So we're going to work with them to get a solution provided and fund the solution with the committee's concurrence and get them in the best shape as quick as possible. Committee have any further questions? If not, any further questions of the Colonel? I didn't mean to have him leave there without thanking him for coming today, and we appreciate it. And again, both you guys I know have worked well with our budget folks and continue to do so, so that we can have the information we can to make a good recommendation. Colonel, do you have anything else?
No,
Thank you very much. I think the last group we have, Chairman Day, you had asked, and this department really falls under a different budgetary area, but you had asked some folks from DNR to come in to talk about their sworn police officers, and I think we may have somebody there that we could come up, if we could have them come up and answer a question or so for the committee at this time. No, do we have that? Yeah, you can pass that out then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name's Colonel Terry West. I'm the chief of the law enforcement unit for Department of Natural Resources, and I do just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here because, as you so adeptly put, we are part of the Department of Natural Resources, not the Department of Public Safety, yet we have a sworn unit of law enforcement officers and are considered one of the top 3 in our state's law enforcement contingency as far as the uniformed officers go. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. I will say that I'm not sure what information has been provided to the committee. Those requests usually don't make it down to my level. I have tried to provide the study committee and other groups with information as those requests have gotten to me. But I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. I know Ms. Kozel just passed out some information in regards to the number of employees, salary, and so forth, turnover within the department. That's available to the committee. I think, Chairman Day, did you have anything further that you want to give a copy of that to? I'll do that. I'll get it. Go ahead.
Basically, I guess any question I would have with you would be consistent with...
Push your button.
Any question I would have at you would be consistent with that asked of other law enforcement agencies. One, is DNR staffed to where it needs to be or where it's been appropriated to be? And 2, are those salaries of market value? Market value meaning, are we comparable to other states? Are we able to keep our current employees in that field of law enforcement? And any other information you might provide, such as rate of turnover and what have you.
Yes, sir. And I can briefly, I think I can answer your question very quickly by saying that our situation almost identically mirrors that of the GBI and the State Patrol, in that we are able to recruit people. At our entry-level salary, we have no trouble in hiring people. Our issue is in retaining them. And again, it's that 5 to 7 year officer. The numbers are very close as far as what it costs us to train officers. I have 222 positions right now that are authorized, and that's post-certified positions. Now that's down from 252 in FY 2001. So I've lost 30 positions to permanent cuts. Of those 222, in last year's budget, in the 06 budget, I was told that 8 of them were frozen, meaning they're not funded, but you didn't lose the positions. So effectively, I take them off the 222. If you don't fund them, the same as not having them. But every vacancy, I'm carrying 18 vacancies right now, and again, I'm told that is my lapse factor. I hired 8 people this year just so I could have an academy to try to plug some holes where I've got rangers covering 3 and 4 counties in some parts of the state. And I had to use federal funds. I used total federal funds from boating safety, Coast Guard funds, and got the Coast Guard to approve because they were concerned that with our population and with our growing number of registered vessels in this state, that our officers were shrinking and that we weren't able to effectively patrol our waterways. So they authorized me to use some of their money to hire 8 officers that I have in school right now. If not for that, I wouldn't have been able to hire any officers. Turnover rate, again, is almost the same. I've lost 19 officers that have just left the agency for other than retirement since FY 2002. Now, that's over a period of 5 years. Of those 19, 15 went to federal agencies and 4 went to local agencies. And that's the first time we've ever lost officers to local agencies. Most of the people that hire on with us have a real innate desire to not only serve the public, but to be outdoors. And many of them are more public servants than they are with that desire to be a policeman. So in the past, it was rare for me to lose a game warden to Cobb County, for instance. I've lost 2 to Cobb County in the past year now. So that's a trend that, again, mirrors exactly what Colonel Hitchens was saying, and also Director Keenan. Same issues, compaction. I've got, for instance, a 20-year Ranger.
Would you give your definition of compaction or compression?
Yes, sir. And I'll tell you, and I'm going to give you my personal opinion as to what happened. When we eliminated the step system, the step merit system plan, and went to the Georgia Gain plan, where we were going to reward people for performance, but then we didn't fund it, so they didn't get rewarded for performance, it crushed that everybody into making the same. And I think the Colonel Hitchens alluded to that fact, that he had a trooper with 10 years was making like $2,500 more than an entry-level trooper. I've got a 9-year Ranger that makes about the same, about $2,000 more than the kids I've got sitting in class in Forsyth right now who've never worked a day. But I'm paying them $2,000 less than I am a man that's worked for 10 years. And it's because he came on in '97 when we had eliminated those step increases. So all he's gotten is just the little increases that we get occasionally, the 2% last year. The other thing that hurts us with compaction is, like last year we did get an increase for the entry level. But again, what it did is it bumped that entry level up against my 7, 8-year officers, tenured officers, the ones that are looking around now going, where the heck am I going to be in 10 more years? I've spent almost 10, and these guys are where I am. Not having that spread, as Director Keenan alluded to, trying to get that 10-year scientist up to a level where they will want to stay with the state. Once you get them to 10 years, they're vested in our retirement, and usually we don't lose them after that. It's that 5 to 10-year period. And that's where our compaction is. It's a tremendous morale problem for our agency also. And I have no answer for our officers that say, Colonel, the kid you just hired makes what I do, and I've been working for you for 8 years. And all I can say is we're trying to address the issue. The step plan that was presented as part of the process by GSP, as the solution, they presented a 3% a year step plan, a merit step plan that really up front loaded that first 10 years of an entry officer's salary. And that solution, when I ran it out for every person that works for me, based on where they are now, and if we could implement that, that would help tremendously.
Penny, have any further questions, gentlemen? Let me just say, and for the record here, your agency comes under Chairman Parsons' subcommittee, and we in no way, shape, or form are trying to get in his business with this budget. I think he knows that, and I think you know that as well. The reason we wanted to have you guys in is because it's law enforcement, and you defend the folks in Georgia, and we have the major part of that within our budget, and we wanted to let you guys know, and I'm sure Chairman Parsons will say the same thing, as we address law enforcement statewide. We want you guys to be, you matter, and we want you to know you matter. And I applaud Chairman Day and the committee that's worked on that today. I mean, it's clear to me, and there's always a competition for dollars, but if you have a public safety officer that's out there putting their life on the line, every day for us, if they're not better at it, and more valuable to us after 4, 5, or 6 years than just a cost of living increase, they probably want to go find something else to do. In other words, if they're working for you and they're not better 4 or 5 years down the road enough for, and I know you think they are, so it's up to us to fix that. And we're going to work on doing that within the constraints we have available to us financially and the other needs. Does the committee have anything further before we adjourn this afternoon? We will be meeting again later in the week, and I will let the committee know in the meantime how we will come together to present our recommendations before that occurs. I'll make sure you know that. If you have any additional information you need, please let the Appropriations Office know, and we will endeavor to get it to you. If there's no further business before the committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. Without objection, we are adjourned.